next up is Amanda Lawrence. She's currently the Director of the APO and a librarian and researcher, and she's particularly interested in grey literature. And she's also going to be talking about linked open data and about LOD collections for public policy. So please make Amanda welcome.
Great, thanks Hugh, and thank you everybody for coming to this session. I'm probably going to come at linked open data from the absolute opposite end, not being a coder. Words are probably my forte, but as was discussed yesterday, I do know a bit of code, and I certainly pay a lot of attention to how things work. And what we might be able to do at the use case end with the technologies that are coming down the line. So I'm going to look a little bit about the context, and then talk just a little bit about APO, and then how we're taking some of these ideas into what we're doing. So this diagram is from the 6th Australian Policy Handbook, published in 2017. So it's a pretty robust and established sort of concept that the policy cycle involves decision-making, implementation, evaluation of a project, identify the issues, do some analysis, use policy instruments, etc. Looks very nice and smooth. But for policymakers, the process is often seems a lot messier. You have a lot of different players, Cabinet, this is examples taken from the European Commission, Parliament, civil society organisations, the private sector, you know, everything is going backwards and forwards. It's a really contested space and it feels really crazy. And then how the public probably feel like public policy is done. So according to the latest modelling, we're somewhere around here, which I think is gnawing sense of disillusionment. I think we might be actually, now this is just embarrassing right at this particular moment in Australia, but it can often feel like policy making is just a pretty kind of crazy space. And one of the reasons for that is that I think we sort of harbour this rational and rationalist, instrumentalist kind of idea of we produce research and we get information, and as librarians we provide that information to people, and if they've got the evidence then away they go, they make good rational decisions. But in fact, there's all sorts of evidence and there's all sorts of reasons why you would use evidence in any particular place or time. So we need to think about, there's any policy concern, what is the particular issue that people are dealing with? There's any context, global, local. So are we dealing local? Are we dealing global? What is the nature of the context, and so that will direct the evidence. And how is it constructed? Sometimes a randomised controlled trial, which is considered the gold standard of research, may be possible, but there's just lots of circumstances when that evidence does not exist and probably wouldn't necessarily be appropriate. And there may be other kinds of evidence, democratic evidence or legal evidence or economic evidence that outweighs that. So we have to think about it as a contested space, and we have to think about a whole range of resources that are in that space. Hugh mentioned that I'm an advocate for grey literature, which I am, but I'm also interested in more now sort of trying to contextualise that in terms of a whole spectrum of publishing, and perhaps moving out of thinking about grey literature and thinking about levels of formality of different publishing types, but all of them are often needed for public policy. So that can be books and journals and news media and big data. Often that's quite well managed by the organisations that produce them because they're commercial entities and they make money even out of their backlog. A lot of the material produced by organisations themselves, reports, discussion papers, research data, is really important, really heavily used, but is managed in a much more ad hoc way. And then we have sort of personal and unpublished material which may or may not surface into the public domain, may or may not be required in the public domain. We have sort of, sometimes archives deal with that material, other times they don't. It's really quite ad hoc. So we need to think about when we're helping, how as information professionals are we helping people find this material, and do we know where it is, and do we know the kind of material that they're actually looking for? Because it's not just going to be what you're buying from EBSCO. So it could be election data, it could be journals, it could be archival material, it could be the grey literature, it could be records. So what I'm interested in doing is connecting APO, having APO be a curated resource for the grey literature, but that's not enough. We cannot be a silo in this space because it makes no sense whatsoever for that to happen. People don't just want the grey literature, they want the topic, they want the material on homelessness. That's what they want, or they want the material on superannuation reform or housing affordability. That may be in a journal, that may be in a report, that may be in a database, that may be in an archive. So APO was established in 2002. We've now got about 40,000 records, 5,000 organisations and around 18,000 authors. So I think it's interesting to think about those 5,000 organisations who aren't usually considered publishers. We are heavily used and highly valued in the policy arena, and have an audience across government, NGOs, education and industry. We are based on an open source Drupal database. So one thing that people use us for a lot is the daily or weekly email newsletters, and we are updated daily, so we really try and keep with the news cycle, as well as doing a lot of archival sort of work. We host full text documents and more recently data, and we have a whole, while often we're thought of just as a newsletter, and there's a whole extensive range of metadata, and we can mint DOIs. So in that way, we're sort of trying to help formalise the grey literature. And anybody can submit content, and that's moderated by our editorial team. And there's profile pages, so we can do impact metrics and downloads, and we're sourced by Altmetrics, and we have a reasonable search system. It needs to be better. So this is what I am increasingly trying to call public knowledge infrastructure, and I'm actually calling for more generally more investment in public knowledge infrastructure, because it's a difficult business case. And we've kind of got the business case for public libraries and state libraries and so on, but we really need to look at how the business case for this for public support occurs in the digital domain. So we've got various wonderful partners, which is fantastic. We also get grants, which I'm going to talk about in a moment, have a bit of general advertising, and rely on contributions from the community. Which is why when I say we want to work with you, we really want to work with you, because whether it's a financial relationship or whether it's a quid pro quo, that makes all the difference to us. So something that we've really been growing with is collections, because of that special interest that I mentioned before, where organisations and researchers are really trying to find in-depth material in the grey literature domain. So that's kind of a bit of background. So with our database, we've been increasingly thinking, how do we move from being a Web 1 type of system with a lot of unstructured textual content, moving through into Web 2 where it's sort of a bit more specialised. But then how do we connect up our database with the other databases that are out there and think about the semantically structured content? I don't know that I really need to go through the principles of linked open data. That's probably, we've kind of gone through that a bit, but one of the key things is being able to provide a stable URI, so an online location for as much of the metadata elements that are in your database as possible. And then to be able to link those to other systems on the web. However, it's interesting to look, sometimes a lot of the use cases of linked data has been with large companies who have multiple databases that are using linked data just for their own internal purposes because actually getting one sort of common database is just impossible. I think the War Memorial is an example of where they've used linked data for that. But often what's required in the linked data process is actually just a lot of fixing up of your database. So in some ways, linked data is just a more glamorous way of saying cleaning up your database so that it's more usable. And so it can, there's a lot of sort of less glamorous work under the hood required to actually be able to get your system ready to be able to talk to other systems. And so evolution and repair, I think, is a really interesting one there. A lot of manual revision and authoring, etc. So one of the things that we've worked on at APO, we've had a couple of grants in the linked data space. And initially it was just bringing in the OCLC's FAST subject headings, which are linked data, and implementing an internationally recognised subject classification system. So that was the first big step for us. And as well as that, we implemented geonames, so another sort of big step. So that was linked data, but it didn't sort of look all that amazing to the outside world. But it was a really big investment in time and so on. What I do think one of the issues with linked data is it's not very clearly explained to the community why you would bother. And I think it's been a little bit frustrating that there's been a sense of do this out of the goodness of your database and of your project, or because we're all libraries and because it's good to share. But ultimately, you've got to be able to put a case to the management and your supporters to what benefit is there going to be for your actual project. And do you know who's going to come and use your links if you make it open? So I found just in doing this most recent sort of grant that actually once I understood what a graph database can do and the way a business is actually using graph databases to be able to extend the metadata that they have to visualise that linked data and to be able to then make inferences from one set of facts or information. Amanda's from Australia. Australia is a country that speaks English. There's a chance that Amanda might speak English, or Amanda, all these other things that may come to be able to be told about me or inferred about me because I live in Australia. And that information is not in my database. So this graph, I don't want to be sort of saying I'm promoting Neo4j, it's just a useful explanation of what a graph database is and the way in which it takes a node and the way you can connect it to a relationship with, I'm not sure if this has got a thing, no, okay. To relationship with properties, and then you have the triple, which indicates what that relationship is, and then that can be actually visualised. So I just wanted to run through what we're doing next, which is in November we were confirmed that we've got funding from the Australian Research Council for a 2-year project to work on linked semantic platforms for social, digital and physical infrastructure. This is working in partnership with Swinburne, RMIT, UniSA, the Australian Data Archive at ANU, AURIN, which is the Australian Urban Research Information Network, Infrastructure Network, sorry, at Melbourne Uni, the Home Modification Clearinghouse at UNSW, and we've got a new partner, Western Sydney University, that's going to come on board, and the Australian New Zealand School of Government. So the basic concept for this is to take the idea of linked data, but really sort of try and take it further. So looking at how do we get content into our database and how do we get metadata added to that content more easily? How do we curate that content in various ways? How do we connect up to related systems? And then what is the nature of the interoperability that might occur between those systems? And then how do we actually provide tools for the research community and the policy community? So I mentioned earlier that we look at collections. So the collections will be a really important part of this, developing in-depth collections around transport, urban policy and planning, low-carbon built environments, social care, digital inclusion, digital health, work and wellbeing, creative industries, open scholarship, as in the policies around open access and so on, e-research, Indigenous policy and administration, and also starting to look at some collections around specific materials that are really hard to find. Evaluations are notoriously difficult to find and uncollected, and case studies as well. So taking a different angle where we sort of really try and hone in on a particular content type. And of course, we're also doing data curation and tools for that. So we want to be looking at how can we get our content in more efficiently. We're still a bit of a cottage industry at APO, a lot of manual curation and a lot of first cataloguing of resources that are online. So we'll continue to do that, and we'll have expert curators working at our partner universities as well as at Swinburne. But then looking at what can we do with text mining, say using Pool Party or some of the other types of tools and technologies that are around, where we can extract entities, whether it's topics, geographic terms, but also being able to get content that we would never other manually get, which may be people, entities that are referred to, organisations that might be referred to, even start to look at something that the Cochrane collaboration has done, which is text mining, to see what kind of research method was used. Was a randomised controlled trial used as a research method or not? But often our researchers are interested in, were case studies used, were surveys used, what was the research method that was actually used. Crowdsourcing, as I mentioned before, so we're hoping to get more and more people involved, and we're also doing digitisation. So that's our tabletop scribe, which we bought with our previous grant, so we'll continue to do that. So we've been doing a whole collection on strategy documents for Australia's cities. So digitising all of those so that there's actually one corpus where you can start to do historical analysis of policies around strategic planning and urban policy. So we already were quite interoperable, and this is another kind of problem with linked data, is that it's not always clear why you would use linked data versus OMI PMH, which we've been feeding into Trove using OAI for about more than a decade. Why you wouldn't just use APIs, why you wouldn't use RESTful interfaces, etc. So it seems to sometimes be a lot of work to do the linked data where it's not clear. And so I don't think we should be feel compelled to do linked data if it's not actually the most efficient solution for what libraries need to do. Let's not, it's just another technology, it's just another tool. It may or may not be the most useful tool for your system. But do, think about what the options are. So we harvested by Altmetric. Altmetric just have come and screen scraped our database without asking us anything. I mean, we are in relationship with them now, but when they first came and when we first discovered that we were being used as a policy source in Altmetric, they'd had nothing to do with us. They've just come along and grabbed the references. So people might be using your content without you needing to do any linked data at all. So yeah, it's I don't think it's always the be all and end all solution. So what we're doing with connected collections is trying to look at specific ways in which we can connect things. So DOIs we're hoping DOIs and the fast taxonomies will be a way that we will be able to link Australian Data Archive data sets, which particularly focuses on social science data, and APO reports. So the ADA does sometimes have a report that might be associated with, say, a Lowy Institute data set, but hardly any metadata, and it's not their core concern. So actually starting to be able to get from the report to the data in an easily flowing way is one of the aims of that. And something else we're also looking at is with the fast subject headings, can we create a subset of policy-related and public interest terms that could make FAST a little bit more usable for smaller collections? And we're also hoping to talk to FAST about making FAST a bit faster, because it's not actually very fast. It's got a problem in that it's based on Library of Congress subject headings, and books just operate at a slower publishing pace than policy documents. So maybe using Wikipedia as a third-party reference. We're also looking at working with Auran to use Jupyter to create some sort of small-scale tools for data analysis and text, because I think we can't just think about data, we need to think about some sort of contextualization for that data. Not everybody's going to want to, read an Excel spreadsheet. They may want to drill down and interact with the data, but if it can be presented in a way that's kind of pretty quick to use, because policymakers need decisions, and need to make decisions, and they need to make them quickly. And also working with a system called the Home Modification Clearinghouse, which does a lot of grey literature production and is very concerned around peer review. So this is one of the issues for how do you evaluate grey literature. So there's a lot of different ways in which we can interoperate with other systems, and some of those are using linked data tools, and some of those are using other kinds of concepts. So is it 5 minutes? Yeah. So one of the things we're hoping to do, and I have been hoping to get to this for a while now, but it's definitely going to happen this year, is actually get onto the visualization of the data. So to me, it doesn't seem like, the be-all and end-all isn't getting to linked data within your own system. It's providing tools for people to understand the information that you have in your system and how that relates to other information. So what we're looking at is being able to, if you think about a topic such as housing affordability, who's in that space? What organisations are producing material that government might be using? What authors are writing about that? Are those authors associated with what organisations? Can we put that into some sort of time dimension? Can we put that into some sort of geographic dimension? So I think because policy is really about positioning and organisations and influencing the political agenda, this will open up an opportunity for people to see who is trying to influence that agenda, and to make the connections around topics, geography and so on. So we're going to have a chance to demo this really soon, because we're working with a project that's sort of come out of Australian National Data Archive, Data Service, but also is a global thing called the Research Graph, which is sort of bring data on researchers and publications and grants together. And so we are part of a pilot that Duraspace is running, where we will be harvested. And I think this is I mentioned this morning about how do you need to store linked data, or do you have to have it in your own database? Because it's once you put triples into your database, you've quadrupled your database. So it's, and that costs servers, and it costs speed, etc. So actually you don't have to do that. There's various tools out there. It looks like I'm promoting Neo4j, but I'm not really. But they do have a community, Neo4j is a commercial and a community product. So there's a few instances of that around. So you can harvest your own content and put it into a data store, which will turn it into triples. We'll make those relationships for you, but keep it separate from your database, which then means you could potentially muck around with that and see what you've got and see what the problems are, and then bring it back in and do it all again. So you can do some piloting, which is, I think, really essential in this space. So then that will be connected up to Research Graph. We've got to do, as that earlier slide indicated, we're going to have to add some more fields in and things, and adjust our schema. So getting schemas to match is still a constant issue. And then that will go into a Gephi visualization, and then part of the project is the Duraspace team will work with us to get that visualization to look good, because it can be a problem with these graph databases is you just get a whole lot of black dots, and if you get even 20,000 records start to look like nothing quite quickly. So there's still an element in which you've got to think about what is the story that you're trying to find out about, and then at what scale can you actually interrogate the data in visually in order to be able to have that make any sense. So that's so hopefully, amazingly, we're meant to be presenting, not me, fortunately, on that in Berlin in late March. So that'll be very exciting. And that's it from me.
Do we have any questions for Amanda? We do have a couple of minutes. If anyone wants to be brave enough to walk to the mic. There are no dumb questions here, by the way. If you're thinking of a stupid question, probably 10 other people in the room are as well, so don't be shy.
Sorry for hogging the microphone all the time, but
do.
Amanda, I did not have any idea that APO is doing this. How do you find your collaborators? And if somebody was interested in collaborating with you, how would we get information about that?
Yes, okay. Well, if you would like to collaborate with us, please just come and talk. And really, it is about having a conversation first, and maybe that won't go anywhere, and maybe it will. We try and be as flexible as possible. A lot of it is about going and having conversations with people, talking to researchers. We're based at Swinburne, so we work with researchers there, and so that's where we've sort of done a lot around creative industries and housing and urban policy and planning. But yeah, it's also us kind of seeing opportunities and going and talking to other people. So,
Okay, so just have a conversation is what I'm
yeah,
hearing.
yeah, it is about having a conversation and just seeing what's possible.
happens. Excellent, thank you.
Sorry, I was just talking to Michelle here, having our own conversation. Thanks, Amanda. You made a comment about thinking critically about, is linked data the right thing? You know, is this bit of a linked data? Oh, we've got to do linked data. I don't know what we're supposed to do. We've got to do linked data. Yeah. So I suppose I wanted to make a quick comment first, and that is that linked data can be consumed or it can be produced. It doesn't need people think, oh, we have to put our stuff out there as linked data, but it can be very usefully used by consuming it into a system but not publishing anything out. And linked data can be linked but not semantic. It can be linked but not open. It can be open but not linked. So there's all kind of manifestations of it. But you also mentioned that the value proposition of linked data and how to sell that to decision makers in an organisation. And I wondered if you had your own point of view on, in your setting, what your pitch is there in terms of the value of linked data.
To be honest, I'm one of the decision makers that has had to be convinced of the value. So linked data sounds sexy, it sounds like a good idea, it's quite good for getting grants because it says, hey, we're going to connect everything up into this perfect, beautiful world. And then you kind of get the money and go, right, so, but actually we could do this 3 different ways, and we're spending public money, so let's make sure that this is the best way. And is it the best way for everything? Because I think, as somebody mentioned, a lot of developers aren't in this space. And so, you know, you kind of go along to your developers, I'm not a developer, and say, hey, we should do linked data. And they're like, really? Oh, well, but you could just get an API and do some screen scraping. Why would you do that? Because we got a grant to do it, because everybody says that it's a great thing to do in libraries. Well, you know, I guess if you want to, but, you know, so then you kind of start to second guess your own decisions and go back to the literature and try and understand it. And I think, as the speaker before was saying, you know, the literature is pretty sort of unsure of itself and of the value, and I don't think, I mean, really it was a revelation when I finally got onto the graph databases and I could see, now I see what business is doing with linked data, and now business is using it in various ways in the graph databases, and now I'm starting to get a sense of what the end goal is, but yeah, I think we haven't really done ourselves any favours in kind of making those connections. So I'm not sure if that's really answered your question.
No, I'm just saying a lot of us in the industry probably aren't sure, probably exactly the same position you're in, and it's something that needs to be explored collectively a bit more too. What's the value that we're looking for? And how can it deliver that? Yeah,
and I think, I mean, I think what's been useful is sort of realising that, yeah, you're right, you can consume other people's linked data, so that is definitely a useful thing to explore. But also, you know, you might not have to do a whole kind of, I'm going to embrace RDFs. You might just look at, well, what kind of, are there schemas that we could be using or classification systems, etc., that are globally interoperable or seem to be some sort of standard? You know, that might be one place to start, so that then when there's an opportunity down the track, your database and your metadata is, you know, a bit more interoperable. And so I think we need to be thinking about interoperability. Linked data may be one way to get that. Identifiers are also another way, which is sort of a kind of linked data, but most people wouldn't necessarily think, oh, adopting, you know, persistent identifiers is part of linked data, but actually it is. And so maybe that's where you need to start, is just thinking, well, how am I going to, you know, what identifiers schemes is my database going to use, ORCID or, you know, DOIs or pearls, or, you know, there's a whole gamut. So that might be, you might want to sort of focus on that as a particular starting point, where you can see, okay, well, that's going to have some value. I don't know about all the rest of the linked data, maybe it will, maybe it won't, but I can see where the value is on that particular piece of work.
Thanks. I'm glad you think that linked data sounds sexy. It doesn't sound very sexy when I say it, but I'm working on that.
So Dorothy
Thanks, folks.
Dixer.
You're going to be in the grant writing business to, you know.
Amanda, would you like a debate between a computer scientist and other people with different opinions at the next Vala, so that we can actually hear experts in the field to discuss this?
I would love that, Ingrid.
There you
Yes.
go, great.
Yes, because I've actually spent a lot of time going around to people saying, so, you know, what's linked data? Do you use linked data? What do you think? Actually asking developers, you know, what's your take on it? Sorry, I'll get off the
Okay,
stage.
I'm sorry, I'm very uncomfortably wrapping you up. Thanks, Amanda.